Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing fabulously, thank you very much, and all the better for spending some quality time with you. So you know the rules, don't forget to get that perfect drink, because I've got a fabulous story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, all over the world there are mysterious, ambiguous, enigmatical deaths that cannot be explained. But when one of those inexplicable cases reaches your backyard, it hits you hard like a brick in the face, especially when the manner of death is nebulously bizarre and elliptical. This is what happened to us in our North American horse ranch in the early 70s. Our old colonial three-story farmhouse, with its minimalistic rectangular shape, was built from whitewashed brick with a central bright pink front door and perfectly aligned wooden red panelled windows, enhanced by a bright cheerful red terracotta roof that rather reminded you of fabulously warm sunny days, relaxing beach holidays and refreshing cool glasses of homemade lemonade. The imposing house, drenched in an essence of its rich and vibrant history, had belonged to our family for many generations, and I believe in the 1800s it may well have been a cotton plantation that had subsequently been converted into a horse ranch with very stunning stable blocks, storage barns, exercise rings, ponds, grazing pastures, and so much more. I know it's very biased to say our property was exquisite, but it really was a magical, enchanting place that overlooked ravishing, beguiling views of the idyllic Kentucky countryside, along with pretty flowery meadows, large areas of natural forest consisting predominantly of well-established mature dogwoods, red maple trees and oaks, that were particularly spectacular in springtime and autumn, along with a silvery lake that sparkled in the noonday sun like an ornate shimmering mirror that reflected the undulating contours of the landscape on its gleaming surfaces, a place regularly frequented by an increasingly large deer population. I was 15 years old at the time, with two older brothers, Noah and Jesse, all whom were homeschooled by my mother. So our daily routine beyond our schoolwork involved helping out on the farm with regular chores like mucking out the stables, cleaning leather tackle, washing, feeding and exercising the horses. I never minded any of these activities, as it was all that I'd ever known, and besides, all the horses with their different personalities, from feisty to easygoing, were like extended members of my own family, whom were loved dearly. It was on a Tuesday morning that I awoke to the drilling, annoying sound of the alarm going off in my bedroom. I groaned inwardly, pulling the duvet over my head, rolling and twisting my body to its opposite side, under the cosy covers, intent on luxuriating in this blissful sanctuary for a moment longer, with a little extension. "Why not?" said that hearkening inner voice. "A few more minutes never hurt anyone. Go on, sleep in today. Who cares?" In a trice, that kindly voice was sabotaged by the no-nonsense Army General, the dominant inner voice of responsibility, the commander-in-chief of my mind, who assumed his role of authority, and began screaming in my head, "The horses! It's the horses! You need to feed them! Get up, you lazy bum! The horses need you!" The voice, like an invisible, hostile hand, jolted me wide awake. My mind became unambiguously aware of my undertakings that I couldn't afford to shirk on this blissfully vibrant spring morning. I raised myself out of bed in a resigned acceptance, my ruffled blonde hair so flattened on one side. I quickly ran my hands through it like a makeshift hairbrush to puff it all up. That would have to do for now, I thought. I threw on some clothes along with my working boots and vigorously dashed down our sweeping wooden staircase through the back door of the kitchen towards the barn. I smiled warmly and nodded at one of my father's farmhands who was bringing out the horses from the stables into the field. "Morning, Nancy," he said to me. "You're up bright and early this morning, just like the chickens. Parents working you hard, are they?" I groaned. "Something like that," I said, rolling my eyes. "They certainly have me well trained. I've been told to give you a helping hand this morning. We need some hay for the horses, I assume. I'll get to work." Bert grinned at me. No rest for the wicked. I'll help you in a second, but I'm just getting the horses into the meadow. It was a sensationally beautiful spring morning. The yellow grass had diminished quite significantly, becoming verdant, emerald, lush and very rich. Many of the fragrant trees were now covered in soft, ethereal, delicate blossoms, while better still the cold winter days had receded, and even in the early morning the golden glaze of the sun burst forth through the skies in a warm radiance. All of a sudden, my dogs picked up a smell. They became curiously animated, like they invariably do when they smell a rat scuttling around. So they bounded towards the barrel that had been flung over on its side and began to bark at it. "Shh," I said. "Be quiet, will you?" But our dogs continued to bark, failing to listen. I smiled to myself as I was almost certain that this was the work of a rambunctious raccoon, or possibly a rat. The latter was not a pleasing thought, but it is a problem with most farms. I walked over to the barrel in order to pick it up off the ground. Then I stood there, hardly daring to believe what I was seeing. Stuffed in the barrel was a dead human corpse, the bedraggled remains hanging limply out of the barrel, with one arm extended. The head was around backwards, as if someone had twisted it around on itself like the cap on a jar. But it was those cold, glazed eyes that disturbed me the most. They looked like lacquered glass marbles. And this wasn't helped by the mortified expression on the face, a gaping, open mouth that was hardened by rigor mortis. It turned my stomach as bitter as gall. Whatever he'd seen in his last moments of life had clearly been distressingly discomposing, for this poor youngster was seriously scary to look at. But who was he, I thought? What was he doing in our barn? Who had killed him in this brutal, horrific way? I stood there as silent as the breeze on a still night, my eyes as large as saucers and my mouth extended wide open in an expression of shock. My mouth became dry and scratchy like rough sandpaper, and there was a hollow, empty feeling inside me. You would think I would scream at the top of my lungs, for that would be the most natural thing to do, but that never happened to me. Words eluded me. They failed to approach me. I was stunned. I gawked at what I was beholding, wondering if in any way this could be even remotely real. Surely I must be dreaming. My little dogs were licking the dead corpse, pawing him in vain, hoping he would awaken from his long slumber. But this man was going nowhere. He could go nowhere. He was well and truly dead. "Everything all right, Nance?" came Bert's voice, peeking his head around the door. But when I did not answer, sensing something was seriously off, he ambled towards me in the barn and stood by my side, staring in horror at the sight of my two dogs trying to revive a dead corpse. He looked up at me with startled eyes. "He's dead," he said, stating the obvious. "Who killed him?" I didn't answer. I just remained focused on the dead corpse, saying absolutely nothing. My heart fluttering in this moment, wrought with mixed emotions of anxiety, horror, and shock. "His head! Oh my God! His head! It's been twisted around! It's on backwards! Who could do this to him? Poor Larry!" "You know him?" I asked, looking at Bert in shock. "Who is he? How can you know him?" He's my nephew," said Bert, growing red in the face. "Larry Cottrell. I know him very well. Well, I knew him very well. I see him most weekends, as a matter of fact. That's when I visit my sister Gladys. He's a nice enough boy, but he gets caught up with the wrong crowd. You know, weed and stuff like that." "What?" I said, looking appalled. "What the heck is he doing in our barn, of all things?" "That's the $600 question," said Bert. "Larry's a petty thief, a poacher. If he was loitering around here last night, well, I hate to say this to you, but he was more than likely purporting on stealing your tackle. You know, saddles and stuff like that, to sell for cash. My sister has tried to keep him on the straight and narrow, but always he falls by the wayside again and again." He rubbed his chin reflectively. Funny thing is, she told him over and over again that he could end up dead going down that wide road of destruction that the Bible talks about. Looks like her words have come to fulfillment. But who would kill him like this, I asked in astonishment, despite what he may have done? No one deserves to die like this, and in such a brutal, deplorable way. Of course, that was the enigmatical question that no one could possibly answer, despite an extensive police investigation requiring lots of people being brought to the station for questioning. But no answers were ever found. It would seem this ambiguous, inscrutable death was marinated in a nebulous, obscure mystery that no one could unveil. Even the medical examiner performing the autopsy could not corroborate either way who or what had killed Larry Cottrell, or how his head could have been twisted around itself like this in such a brutal, barbaric way. The coroner's report was somewhat inconclusive, rather fuzzy and obscure, clouded by doubt and uncertainty, although the cause of death was clear, as the neck had indeed been snapped and broken. It was unlikely a human could kill a person like this, although it wasn't altogether impossible. If this was a human, then we had a murderer in our midst, but it was rather unlikely, and it was certainly not a bear, although they are inclined to attack human beings on the head and shoulder area, but twisting a human head around like this would require a nimbleness that is clearly lacking in a bear. So who and what had killed Larry Cottrell? It would seem the mystery remained unsolved. 2 years went by, and one day in the late afternoon, my brother and I were cleaning tackle at the time, in one of the storage barns, and then we heard an ominous shooting sound as bullets were being fired. "What the heck?" said Noah, looking from me to Jessie with a solemn, disquieted expression upon his face. His forehead broke out in deep furrows. He looked very puzzled. Finally he grabbed his rifle. "I think we've got poachers again," he murmured. "Dad will be very upset that this is happening all over again. What a bloody cheek! It's not even shooting season yet. The nerve of some people! It makes my blood boil. Let's go and warn them off." I began trailing my 2 armed brothers across the grassy meadow, where several horses were now grazing. 2 of the social ones with friendly natures came trotting eagerly towards us, but we ignored them, as our purpose was unduly focused. We climbed over the border fence that framed the fridges of the woodgrove. In a trice Noah turned around and frowned. He looked at me in surprise, as if he couldn't imagine why on earth I'd accompanied them. With a stern, stony and sombre tone to his voice, he said, "Go back to the house, Nance. This is no business for a girl. It's not safe," he said. "There are poachers in there." "But please, Noah," I begged. "Please, I really—" "No, Nance," he said, his voice sounding astringent and fierce. "Go back to the house now. You hear me?" I nodded and pretended to turn around to retreat back to the house, but I was doing nothing of the sort. I decided to enter the woodgrove from a distant approach further along the fence line, where some of the bay and black horses were now grazing. I could enter the woods there, I thought, and my brothers would be unable to detect me. I loathed the fact that being a girl meant I couldn't get involved in things deemed dangerous or perilous by men in our household. They seemed to think that I had the intelligence of a goldfish, the competence of a sloth, the fighting potential of a toy dog. In short, they had so little faith in me, or no faith at all. How often had my father and brothers taken sides and shaken their heads woefully, saying, "Sorry, Nance, but it's too hazardous, it's too intimidating, it's too unsafe, it's too challenging, or it's too tough." It was always too something in their opinion, which invariably meant my mother and I were nearly always excluded from all hunting, climbing and whitewater rafting events. I was sick and tired of being excluded. I was more than capable of holding my own, yet my brothers treated me as if I was as fragile as a Barbie doll that might just break in any given moment. It was absolutely ridiculous. My mother would always shake her head and say, "Don't be so upset, Nance. The men in the household mean well. They're just being protective towards us because they love us so much. How about a cup of tea, dear, and a slice of cake? I'm sure you'll feel a lot better." In her dreams, I would think, how could cake make things better? She was sounding just like that French cow in the history books. What was her name? Marie Antoinette, who thought cake was the solution to the problem of all the starving people in France, when they couldn't even afford to eat bread. What was this big deal about cake anyway? I didn't get it. It hardly solved the world's problems, but my mother clearly thought it did. I wanted to be out there, in the eye of the storm, on the precipice of danger, or on the sheer face of a cliff, or on the edge of a parachute. I felt certain that such wonderful experiences made people feel vibrantly alive. Look at people who jump out of planes with their parachutes. They do it again and again because of the adrenaline rush and surge that they experience. I wanted a taste of that adventure, a flush of excitement. I began to feel annoyed with both Noah and Jessie. I shook my head in frustration, my heart hardening with a steely resolve and a spunky pluckiness. I wasn't going to be pushed away like this, not any more. How dare they belittle me like this, I thought, marching towards the woodgrove with a dogged spiritedness. All of a sudden, I heard more gunshots being fired, and an unfamiliar male voice shouting, "Kill him! Kill him now! Shoot! Shoot! Kill him! Kill him!" All of a sudden, my heart began to thunder in my ears. My pulse began to race. My mouth became dry and scratchy, while a lump developed in the back of my throat. What if the poacher was trying to kill one of my brothers? The ominous words, "shoot him," rung in my head like an alarm bell, alerting me to the ever-present dangers that my brothers were clearly now in. I needed to rescue them. I needed to save them right now. I didn't stop to think about my own risks that I was taking. Not at all. I bolted into the woods. I stopped dead in my tracks because standing with its back away from me, on his long legs, was a large, aggressive bear that appeared to be roaring in anger, pounding its chest with its fists. I breathed a sigh of relief. My brothers were not the poacher's target. It must be this bear. He was their target. I realised that the poachers had accidentally stumbled on him and were trying to take him down with very little success, for the agile creature appeared to foil all their bullets. Once again, the poachers fired a round of bullets at the creature, but he was faster than the bullets, bouncing out of the way every single time. I was absolutely astonished. How can you be faster than a bullet, I thought. I'd never considered bears to be so nimble, acrobatic and graceful. I could hear a man's voice saying, "Bloody hell! I've run out of bullets, Tobe. We're going to have to make a run for it." But it's going to kill us," came the other voice. "I can't do it, Malcolm. I can't. You go. Leave me here." As I was staring at the creature, I realised that this was not a bear. The symmetry wasn't right. The body shape was all wrong. It was more like that of a man, but a man that's covered in hair. What was this thing? It was a creature that didn't have paws but hands. They were attached to very long arms. This was no bear. What was it? Whatever it was, its stature was massive, as was its girth. It was easily 7 foot tall, possibly 600 pounds in weight, and 3 foot wide. The creature glanced around in my direction, where I'd taken cover and hidden myself cleverly behind a large oak tree. Well, so I thought. But now his nose was sniffing the air. "Oh my God," I thought. "I think he can smell me. What if he comes after me?" In that moment my life flashed before my eyes, while fear zoomed through my veins like a steam train on full throttle. What on earth should I do? The questions raced through my mind, but I had no answers to any of them. They seemed like futile words, like birds flying in the sky that had lost their navigational focus. Should I run? Should I remain hidden? Should I hope that he doesn't just see me? I couldn't make any decisions because my mind had become a cloudy, murky, confused fog. I couldn't reason at all. The creature turned around, still sniffing the air through his very wide, flat nose. His snorting wasn't unlike that of one of our horses on the farm. If I wasn't mistaken, he seemed to like the smell he'd picked up. My scent. I couldn't decide whether that was a good thing or not. I mean, cannibals like the smell of a roasting human corpse, don't they? I could see the two shadowy figures of the poachers, momentarily encouraged by the creature's distraction, using this vital life-saving second to sneak quickly past him, their eyes glazed by looks of sheer terror as they clung on to the vain hope that the creature would not turn around and attack them. It seemed that his interest in them had most certainly waned, rather like a heavy storm that suddenly dissipates. As his rage had now subsided, it had melted away and gone. In a trice he was standing yards away from me, looking at me through deep-set dark eyes. He was behaving like a boy at a disco that's dying to ask you to dance, because he fancies you so much, but cannot quite summon up the courage to do so, in case you might reject his advances. This brazen creature that had formerly not been afraid to express his dominance and power to those poachers had now transformed himself significantly into a calm, serene animal that looked at me with such awe, as if I was the most beautiful girl that he'd ever seen. It was my turn to be courageous, my turn to be bold and brave. I moved away from the oak tree, looking directly into the creature's eyes, maintaining eye contact. I said to him, "I need to go now." It rolled its head to the left and then to the right, while his bright eyes twinkled at me with excitement, and then he backed away to let me pass him. I walked away, pretending to be very confident and feeling anything but. In reality, every part of my body was throbbing with fear. It was as easy as that to get past him. I glanced briefly over my shoulders to see him still watching me. I walked away. His expression was quite literally one of an adoring fan. I don't know how else to describe it, but he almost certainly had a crush on me. I don't just think it, I know it because I felt it. When I returned home, I discovered my brothers were back at the house, with an EMT putting my brother Noah onto a stretcher, as in their haste to run after the poachers, Noah's had tripped over a rock and broken his femur. My brother Jesse had brought him back to the house, helping him hobble on his leg. I don't think they even gave the poachers a second thought, as all focus was now on my brother getting to hospital safely. "It doesn't look good," said the EMT to my mother. "It looks like a rather bad break. I'm no expert in these matters, but I can tell you I think he's going to need an operation." Oh dear, tutted my mother. "You boys are always getting yourselves into trouble." It was only after my brother had gone to hospital that I tried to reflect on what it was that I'd encountered in those woods. It was a humanoid ape-like creature, covered in long flowing hair, with a human face. I now know all these years later that it most certainly fits the profile of a Bigfoot. I realise that I may have well saved those poachers from an almost certain death by providing enough of a distraction for the Bigfoot so that they were able to escape his clutches. So perhaps being a woman is not always powerless. As for the mysterious death on our property with the head twisted around in the wrong direction, was that Bigfoot responsible for that death? More than likely, but then again, one can never be totally sure. When I told my brothers my extraordinary encounter with the anomalous creature, they were not best pleased with my rebellious behaviour, but were somewhat alarmed by my story nevertheless. Jesse tirelessly searched for the creature in our woodgrove, armed with his high-caliber rifle, fearing that the creature posed a threat to us. After hundreds of fruitless searches, we came to the conclusion that we had a territorial Bigfoot on our land that regarded all the animals, people and buildings that were living there as his territory, much like a guard dog would do. We were told by a Native American that was acquainted with Bigfoot habits and behaviour that this was more than likely the case. It would seem that any uninvited guest loitering around our land at the dead of night was not welcome, yet all the owners and animals and people living on the premises were clearly being protected. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what a fabulous story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, goodbye and good night.